So today, we need to talk about the devastating civil war in Sudan. And we're going to start with one single horrific event that honestly reveals just about everything you need to know about this conflict, why it's happening, and why it was so tragically predictable.
Just listen to this eyewitness account. It's from Nawal Khalil, a nurse in the city of El Fasher. Her words, they just cut right to the bone, to the human cost of a war that has absolutely spiraled into one of the world's worst crises. And her story starts with the day her city fell.
Okay, so on October 26, 2024, after a brutal 18-month siege, the city of El Fasher in Darfur, it fell to paramilitary forces. And what happened next? Well, it wasn't just a military victory. It was the beginning of an all-out rampage. Fighters just stormed through the city. They were executing unarmed civilians and even attacking the wounded in their hospital beds, exactly like that nurse described. They targeted places like the Saudi maternity hospital, killing hundreds of patients and staff. And, in this chilling act of psychological warfare, they filmed a lot of these atrocities themselves and then posted them online.
And it's not just eyewitness reports. We actually have technology that helps validate these horrifying accounts. Independent researchers over at Yale University analyzed satellite imagery from after the attack. And what they found was, and I'm quoting here, evidence consistent with mass killing and large bloodstains at multiple sites. This confirms that what happened wasn't just chaos, it was a systematic slaughter.
So, who is responsible for all this violence? Well, at its core, this war was born from a bitter power struggle between two men, two generals who used to work together, but are now literally tearing their own country apart. On one side, you've got the Sudanese Armed Forces, or the SAF. This is Sudan's official national army, and it's led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. On the other side, you have the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. They're a really powerful paramilitary group led by General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who's better known as Hemeti. These two have been locked in this incredibly brutal conflict ever since their fragile power-sharing deal just completely fell apart back in April 2023. And the result of that power struggle? Well, you can see it right here on this map. The country has been, for all intents and purposes, ripped in two. The RSF now controls these huge swaths of the west, including most of Darfur. And meanwhile, the SAF holds the east and the center. It's a de facto partition of the entire nation. And this split has come at a cost that is it's unimaginable. The fighting has created what the United Nations is now calling the world's worst humanitarian crisis. And honestly, when you look at the numbers, it's not hard to see why they're saying that. Let's just start with the death toll. The estimate is over 150,000 people. But the really tragic part is that most experts agree that number is a significant undercount. It's almost impossible to track the full scale of deaths from the violence itself, let alone from all the starvation and disease that follows. Then you have the displaced. A staggering 14 million people have been forced from their homes. Now, to put that in perspective, that's more people than have been displaced in Syria or Ukraine. It is, by a huge margin, the largest displacement crisis on the entire planet right now. And what about the people who are still there? For them, just surviving is a daily struggle. 30 million people, we're talking over half of Sudan's entire population, are in urgent need of humanitarian aid. And it's not a future threat. Famine has already been officially declared in parts of the country. And look, this catastrophe isn't just staying inside Sudan's borders. It's spilling over everywhere. Over 3 million refugees have poured into neighboring countries like Chad, Egypt, and South Sudan. And that exodus is completely overwhelming aid groups and threatening to destabilize the entire region. For so many people in Darfur, the tactics we saw in El Fasher, the ethnic targeting, the sheer brutality, all of it feels terrifyingly familiar. And there's a reason for that. You see, the RSF wasn't just created out of thin air. It has a very, very dark origin story. So, to really understand the RSF, you first have to understand the Janjaweed. These were Arab militias armed by Sudan's old dictator Omar al-Bashir to go in and crush an insurgency by non-Arab ethnic groups in Darfur. This was back in the early 2000s. And their campaign of killing and ethnic cleansing was ultimately declared a genocide. This timeline just lays it all out, doesn't it? The RSF of today is the direct descendant of the Janjaweed. In 2013, the state officially rebranded them as the Rapid Support Forces, but they were the same fighters, the same commanders, just with a new name.
What's happening today, it's not new. It's a horrifying pattern of violence, just repeating itself.
Now, you might be asking, how can a war this destructive just keep going? Well, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Both sides are getting a lot of support from powerful international backers, and each of them has their own strategic reasons for wanting a certain outcome. According to UN analysis and U.S. intelligence, the primary backer of the RSF is United Arab Emirates, who are accused of supplying weapons and money. The official army, the SAF, they've got their own supporters too, including logistical help from Egypt and some pretty sophisticated drones from Iran and Turkey. And this web of foreign support is what makes finding peace so incredibly difficult. You have these diplomatic groups like the Quad, that's the US, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE, and they're supposed to be mediating a solution. But this reveals the central and frankly cynical problem. Some of the very countries at the table calling for a truce are the exact same ones accused of arming the fighters. The fall of al-Fashir, it wasn't just another battle, it was a major turning point. It has pushed Sudan ever closer to a permanent split, to state collapse, and to an even bigger humanitarian catastrophe. But even in victory, the future is anything but certain. As former U.S. official Cameron Hudson points out, a group that was built on brutality and looting might not actually be able to govern. The RSF's control over Darfur could end up exposing their own failures, which could lead not to stability, but to even more chaos. All of this leaves us with a really challenging final question. The UN has called out a crisis of apathy from the international community. 20 years after the world watched a genocide unfold in Darfur, it really seems to be happening all over again. So, as Sudan splinters, we have to ask, is the world's indifference the final accomplice to this tragedy?